Okay, this is a test of racing with the Starborn runner. I just want to see if it's even feasible to really do racing in No Man's Sky. I'm on a nice kind of not quite mountainous planet. And the idea is, hang on, my headphones are a bit loud. Let me just turn myself down a bit. The idea is that I'm going to place down markers. So I'll show you. There's a maximum number of beacons you can place down. So what I've done is I've placed down markers in rainbow colour order. And there's a red marker, and then an orange marker, and then a yellow marker, a green marker. Where's the blue one? Must be here somewhere. Oh, there it is. You can just about see it there. And then the start and end is at my base, which is here. And so the concept basically is to start at the base, take off. Oh, I'm not really used to flying on planets with the, what's the technology called again? Not the instability drive, which makes you drift. So I'm not used to that. So I might be a bit weird in taking off and landing, but it's quite okay flying. Now, one of the interesting things about the new Starborn runner, which is available in the beta, is the photonics core is back, which is pretty surprising. This was originally a pre-release perk. It came in one of the pre-release ships, and also you got the blueprint so you could put it in other ships. And it hasn't seen the light of day since. Now, it doesn't seem, if I take that out of there, it doesn't seem like they've given us the blueprint. But it's very effective because you can see this is boosted. Let's put it there. It gets an added boost, an added maneuverability. Boost is when you're boosting forward with the both buttons pressed down. Maneuverability bonus and a fuel efficiency for the pulse drive. We can now make it even better than it used to be by technology supercharging it, and 44% boost is pretty comparable with probably some not so great S-Class modules, but it effectively means that we can shove another S-Class module in. Now I've been doing a little bit of getting some X-Class modules. These aren't the absolute best X-Class modules, but they're not bad. They're all better than S-Class in their boost and maneuverability, put it that way. And I've shoved the photonic, well, the photonics core was already in there. I've shoved the instability drive in there, which does give us a little bit more adjacency bonus. If I move that out of there, for instance, my maneuverability figures, it was 2776, it goes down to 266, so it's clearly boosting maneuverability. Whether that makes a lot of difference to speed is another matter. And the setup here, I've just made a tower supposedly so it can be seen from a distance, but the draw distance for the base at speed is not great. And I've created a little room, so theoretically you could do races from a seated position. So ready, steady, go. But the trouble is it does take a while to get up, so it doesn't feel like you're racing it until you're stood up. But it could be useful for, say, if you wanted to do timed racing with 2 or more people. So the next person up would sit in the chair and they'd wait until the other person came and tagged them in. if you wanted to do a 24-hour rally or something. Now, one of the problems potentially with racing is the draw distance speed. They do seem to be doing a bit of work on draw distance, but it does depend on the planet. On this planet, I've deliberately chosen one that doesn't have one of the larger assets. See if I can see, like an asset like this, some like this shell thing here, doesn't always pop in straight away. There are certain assets that pop in closer because they're expecting to be closer. Expecting to be smaller and therefore not needed to be popped in until they're closer. Which means that when they're randomly slightly bigger, they can end up being, well, just having a very, very short draw distance. So you can be driving along in an exocraft, for instance, and then suddenly bump into things, which is obviously not great. But this planet doesn't have any of those that you might bump into. I've tried in a few other planets before I settled on this planet. Now, the other reason I have chosen this planet is because my thinking is, for racing, you want to stay below a certain level. Otherwise, I mean, what's the point? You could just fly up into the sky and just aim at a marker, and it's just how good your modules are. So my thinking is you'd want to maintain a low speed, or a low to the ground speed, which would be probably maxing out whatever your modules will max out at the bottom. So if we're right down here, low down, you can see my modules are maxing out around about 334, 335. In fact, there should be, oh, this will do, this, there you go. It's like a nice low area. So you can see it's 335 in a straight line. And so one way of regulating the height, or regulating that you're at least not just flying up, would be that you're not allowed to go above a certain speed based on your standard speed at the lowest level. So with mine being 335, I'm saying that the ceiling is 337 and you would get a penalty every time you go above 337. Now that would be a bit tricky here because we'd have to review the footage and see how often people went above 337 and how long they stayed above 337. My thinking would be you'd add like a few seconds every time you hit 337. And if you were above 337 for more than a few seconds, then you would also count double that time that they were above that speed. But obviously a racing situation where they actually have integrated it into the game would be a little bit different. Obviously there would be some kind of rule. I don't know how the rule would work, but maybe there would be a ceiling you're not allowed to go above or whatever. So the track here is to turn, head towards the red, trying to keep your speed in the 335 to 336 range. You can go above the terrain, but you're running the risk of going above. Well, you're also running the risk of hitting things, which can slow you down a little bit. But you're running the risk of going above that. I've made a relatively short course with as many markers as were allowed. And I just thought I would test it out and see how it works. So I've shoved a timer onto the stream. And there's kind of a mix of terrain on the course. And I'm just going to start from here, and I'm just going to hit start on that timer and go. My thinking is stay low quite quickly and maybe skirt around rather than run the risk of going above that ceiling, because there's a slight drift. You can kind of drift around a corner a little bit. And the idea is that we would have to go outside all of the markers. So it's like a circuit. Now, real aeroplane racing used to be very kind of stunt racing based. It used to have like large circles you had to fly through and quite tricky tracks, which would be quite interesting and wouldn't have this problem of the draw distance as much because you'd be in a smaller area. But I think this is coping okay. What I've done, I've capped my frame rate at 60 just to see if it drops below that. And at the moment it's staying pretty stable. And we're going pretty fast. I was comparing this forward momentum to fighters, and this is faster in this ship. Of course, if you prefer third person view, you can't really see your speedometer to know if you're breaking the rules. Ouch. That's another problem, in that it doesn't slow you down very much when you hit the landscape, unless you really clonked it. In this particular course, there's a trade-off between flying high and not. See, I just hit 337 there, so I would give myself a penalty in a competitive situation. So we're heading for green. Whoops, hit this thing again. See, it didn't really slow me down much. That time it did a little bit. Quite bad flying today. So we're trying to skirt left of this save beacon, which I think this one's out just on a hillock, and it turns into like the home straight. How far away are we? 30 seconds-ish. I guess you could also say you're not allowed to go above the mountains around you, but then that would be very kind of subjective, and you'd need judges that did more than just work out the objective things like whether or not you went above the speed limit. So I was in danger of going above the speed limit there. So this is kind of designed as a home straight, where most of the terrain is quite low. You can just maintain top speed without really, I say without really hitting the land, but I just did. And again. the blue marker is sitting on a colossal archive, and it's in quite a nice position at this angle where you have to kind of skirt it, and to go around the outside of it you have to skirt the mountain and then kind of immediately turn. So you're kind of drifting with the instability drive. Here it is. So you could, I demonstrated, you can hit it if you're not very accurate. And then we have about 30 seconds, just less, on the remaining home straight. Now, ideally you want to slow down just enough to get the landing, and then I would stop it there, just as you get that engine sound. So let's take a note of that. 6 minutes, 1 second, 0.04. And see what kind of variance, and whether it's even worth racing. So let's clear that, and then start again. So trying to avoid going above 336. It's easier to stick in 335 than flirt with 336, because that's the default speed for this particular ship at this height. It would be nice if I could find enough colossal archives, forgot what they were for a minute, that specifically allowed us to only use those as markers. And it's slightly frustrating that you can only position a set number of save beacons. So if they did implement racing in any way similar, which they could do it completely differently, they'd have to give us more waypoints than this. This part is the tricky part, to stay below 337, or 336 rather. So I think I might have I went over it a couple of times there. Alright, so let's try and use the drift around the corner. Failed to do that well. So yellow next. This is quite a long stretch, the yellow. And I'm still torn over whether to come around this mountain lower, to stay below the speed limit. So you can see little bits of the terrain spawning in and correcting itself, but not bad enough at the moment to really cause a problem. In fact, I don't think I can use that as an excuse for occasionally hitting the ground. So this is the turn before the home straight. Trying to be a bit more conservative with my routes to see if that actually speeds us up a bit. And so back into this long drag towards the finish. I wonder if my racing would improve if it was daytime. So we're coming up on the blue marker. I think it's here. Yep. Try not to hit it this time. So I would say, judging by the time at the moment, there's probably just not that much variance to really turn it into a racing game. Oh, except my landing ability, which probably took a few seconds off. Yeah, I probably lost a couple of seconds at the end there. 6:07.85. So on a course that long, the variance is very low. So I would suggest it's not really demonstrating an awful lot of ability. And I'm not demonstrating an awful lot of ability because I did quite badly, but now one other thing that did intrigue me, this sentinel pillar here, it can remain as a marker unless you actually land there. So you could introduce it as a different type of race. If I go over to it. Now this is roughly lined up with the last marker. So if, for instance, you said as part of your race you had to shoot a sentinel and then carry on, you would then have people on your tail at all times. So if we start at the blue, which is quite close, yeah, he's not going to be a threat, he's nowhere near me. before I realised I was going to run out of beacons very quickly, this was going to be the start. Just here. I didn't actually land on the landing pad. So I was thinking start here, head to the sentinel pillar, shoot a sentinel, and then head to red and all around until the end. And you would actually end up having people on your tail. It could reduce your speed, make it a little bit more variable and interesting. So you would get to here. There you go. And then head over to the red. Now, one of the problems, I think it reduces your speed if you have your squadron out. So I'm going to get rid of those. I think just being shot has taken the top speed away. But then this causes its own problems in that how do we regulate the speed and therefore the height? It seems like my stable speed is 282 when being shot at. 283. I keep forgetting to evade. Don't actually have very good weapons on here. The problem is they seem to be able to shoot even when they're not pointing directly at you. So evading their shots is actually quite difficult. Oh, I've diverted power to the shields by accident. Maybe it did it automatically. I don't think it did. So my main thinking is you shouldn't be allowed to change your power systems. If we divert to engines, we do get a bit of a boost. So now my top speed is significantly higher. I mean, I guess it's just choosing a mode. As we're not timing this one, doesn't really matter. See, I took a few hits there. And refueling would be quite slowing. Evading and low flying is tricky. I'm going to have to try. I keep messing it up because my fingers cramped a bit on my controller. See, I'm not able to evade him at all, even though he can't possibly be always pointing at me. You can see the direction he's pointing and he's kind of swinging left and right. I've just gone past the marker. I'm probably on the wrong side of the mountain for this straight now. Yeah, I reckon I should be down there. So we'll just see if we can get this right this time. That's better. I think the other problem with the interceptors is they can theoretically fly through mountains. Let's see if going inside gets rid of that. Don't think it will. I'm going to do my old trick of getting up to a height. Let's wait until they arrive. Start low. Get up to the cloud level. And just skim the tops of the clouds. At maximum speed of about 3.5 1.5 units per second, and then you manage to get rid of them. So much speculation about whether or not they will bring any form of racing into the game. I'm not convinced by what some of the data miners are saying. To me, they just seem to be looking at the wrong assets. They're saying, well, there's this core section here, this new nose section, and there are other fighters that have just this core stripped so that we could put things like these wings and different engines on the back. But there's no evidence that those engines exist in the code. And if we go into third person, I can't remember if I've got that. I'm not convinced that the engines we're seeing are anything other than that pinky void colour. And I wouldn't be surprised if we were to change. I'm being shot at. Whereas this comes with this installed. So there have to be assets in the game to allow us to recolor those engines just like any other ship. So I don't really think that finding some different engine colors demonstrates anything. But it would definitely be nice to have some form of customization. So on balance, yes, it looks like the engine's up to it on some planets. In fact, I'll maybe go to let's just make a save point. I'll show you what I mean about planets that have the wrong type of asset. I think the other planet on this system is it that one? Or are we in no, current system, that one. See if I fall through the floor again on this one. I didn't. Last time I did. And quite apart from this being a storm planet, I have a feeling there were some assets on this planet that were popping up a little bit late. Let's see what happens. Maybe it wasn't this planet. I mean, there are more assets popping in. And we're at the edge of the draw distance. And there have been times when the engine hasn't been this efficient. And we could easily outpace the draw distance at low level flying. And I am on a modern graphics card, so not all graphics cards necessarily will pop in at the same speed. Yeah, nothing's popping in at the last minute on this planet. Can't remember what other planet I might have tested now. But I came to this system specifically for that other planet because I knew it was kind of not fully mountainous. Wouldn't have been that one. Could have been this one. Let's try that one. This planet is a very nice planet. Don't think there are any assets popping late here. What I'm looking for is on some planets, some of the smaller assets are actually drawn slightly bigger, and they can pop as if they're going to be small, therefore pop closer, but then just get in the way. No, can't see any here. But then, of course, the implementation, if they do racing, may not involve low-level flight, or it may not be just for low-level flight. What other system could it have been that I was seeing the problem? Could have been this one. This is where I was first testing. I think the planet I'm about to start on is fine. What I was testing here was that the idea of running to a sentinel pillar and back with something on your tail on the way back. So here, there's a sentinel pillar a good time away, about 8.5 minutes away. But I felt like the terrain just wasn't varied enough. It's all relatively flat, at least on this run from that base. And the assets are popping in fine here. Maybe there was another planet in this system. So, to recap something that I was talking about earlier, the sudden reappearance of the photonics core, which comes as standard on the Starborn runner, is a big surprise. I didn't think we'd ever see that again. And one of the problems I used to have with some of the min-max builds is they would include the photonics core, but that particular part was usually save edited in, so it's a bit exclusive to PC players or other platforms that had the ability to save edit, unless the player happened to be a pre-release player. Might have been this planet, but it's difficult to tell if anything's popping in at the moment with this storm. And obviously that doesn't make for a very good race. It'd be nice if we could get ripples on the water if we're going to have higher speed stuff. I really like the way that Star Citizen wants to do ripples on the water in the future. But obviously the problem with Star Citizen, it wants to do everything in the future. Come on, Storm, go away. People were wondering if this ship had hover. It's slow, but it's not hovering. So it has... What am I doing? I want to go to... So it's going at 20 U a second. And I can't slow down any more than that, I don't think. No. So that's not hovering like the Interceptor. Okay, now that it's clearing, we need a bit of land. I might have come to the wrong part of town. Yeah, this is too watery. Let's go up and see if we can spot a bit that isn't. It's all quite watery. Pretty sure I found somewhere on this planet that did have the potential, but the storms were just too common. So it's probably over that way a bit. No, nothing looks particularly promising. Storming out in the space as well. Let's see if some of this pops in so it's not water. A little bit. So what I'm looking for are assets that pop in far too close. It might have been this planet that had them. Yeah, I think that there was a cactus. Yeah, these blocks are popping in really very suddenly. It wasn't a cactus, it was a greenish block. So a race course on this planet could be a bit problematic. See the way they popped in there across that ridge. So you might be just trying to hug the terrain. And those blocks would pop in and you'd hit them. Potentially stop you completely, so that wouldn't be great. I'm trying to think, there's another example. Of a planet that wouldn't be too bad. Let's pull the anomaly in. Sound effects on this ship when they come into land are quite interesting. You can hear the engine revving down. That easy step up teleporter on that balcony makes it trickier to fly up. Yeah, I think there's an R&D base that... Not that one. Probably that one. No, that's not it. That one. So on this planet, there's no problems on this planet, but it just demonstrates that on some planets the engine is definitely up to it. But obviously this is a very, very flat terrain. But this was the planet I was testing the top speed of this particular setup I keep hitting the ground, Brumanek. Trying to hug the ground a bit too close, I think. So top speed with power diverted to engines, 381. It's not bad. Low flight. Obviously up here somewhere it suddenly flies up. And that ceiling issue, not having a ceiling, makes racing much too boring. Because if we're up here, you're just flying towards a mark. So you'd have to have either obstacles for terrain or some kind of fly through thing, like a hoop, like you get on some of those planets that have got those rocky hoops, or other racing assets to keep you low down. So while we're here, let's compare a couple of different ships. So the Golden Vector and the Utopia Speeder are pretty much the same ship. The only difference was that the Utopia Speeder came with the... Oh, I'm looking at the wrong type of technology. Came with the flight assist override already in there. So the existing speed of the Utopia Speeder, for comparison, 348, 398, 399. But this hasn't got the photonics core in it. So let's try putting that in. Because I don't have the blueprint, I'm going to have to strip it out of the other ship and put it in this one. I'm heading to the landing pad and I can't land there, there's a ship on it. Oh, I didn't put that back in. So that will adjust the top speed of this one. So let's just quickly double check the top speed of this one. So engines 386, it's the standard speed, I think. Yeah. Right, so let's rip out the... That was over here, wasn't it? Rip out the photonics core. I mean, this isn't perfectly optimized anyway. That's probably the best place, but maybe next to the same. Yeah. Oh. So without fully optimizing it, that's not a bad situation. Power diverted to engines. See, that is faster. Even though it doesn't have as good a core. Actually, no, I think it does have a higher core. We'll check that when we get back. So this is... it would help if I could stabilize. I keep looking at the speed and not where I'm going. So it's 432. It stabilizes that at low. Compared to 386. And I don't think there was anything really special about this particular ship. Apart from the fact it looked fast. So core here is 400.4 maneuverability. Actually, because there seems to be a few bugs with core, I'm going to take the photonics core out and put it in the other one before I do it. Before I compare. Oh. So that's 394, so it's definitely lower. Which suggests that the stats aren't as high. So the photonics core is doing the heavy lifting here. Actually, let's double check jumping in and out, because it does depend what ship you're in. Yeah, 394. I think the one that's bugged is the core damage potential. It always seems different depending on the ship, and sometimes even which multi-tool you're carrying. So it suggests it's just looking at the wrong variables occasionally. So it's a little bit surprising that the new racing ship that is very much styled for racing, with that racing decal that kind of harks back to Joe Danger, isn't the fastest ship, which does make me wonder if there are going to be different ships of this type available, and we might be able to find better ones. So they've given us a standard one. It's difficult to tell at the moment because I don't think the save editor is running, so I can't check the stats. At the moment, the save editor, or the last time I checked, the save editor just says that it's a corrupted file. Partly because I ran the expedition in this save to get this ship. So in summary, I think at least this type of racing, low level, flying through the terrain, racing against the clock, is possible. It has some potential, but it would need some engine stuff to actually facilitate the racing, a bit like the exosuit racing. And that they would need to have interesting elements. Maybe there would have to be a ceiling height that you're only allowed to, you can't go above a certain ceiling height. Maybe there would have to be big hoops you have to fly through, big virtual hoops you have to fly through perhaps. Or just a bit like I've set up here, some markers that you have to fly on the outside of. Or a bit like a slalom, you have to go left of one, right of the next. Or gates, you have to go through the middle of them. As I was saying before, the kind of aeroplane flying you used to see back in the 70s, I don't know if it's still being done these days, it probably is somewhere, used to be more acrobatic. So you'd say fly, and then you'd have to kind of maybe loop over and go through a hoop that was a bit like aeroplane equivalent of show jumping, going over different jumps. So in this case you'd be going through different hoops. So you go through this hoop and then loop round and go through another one, and then maybe flip over and head for one behind you. That kind of thing could be fun. But in general, as I say, I think it's viable. That the engine is just about up to it on not all planets, but most planets. The ships don't go too fast on the planets. It's just setting up those rules that make racing fun, either against the clock or against friends. I mean, in the 2 runs I did on this planet, there was 6 seconds difference. On a 6-minute course. So I don't know, is that enough variance? Do you need something that introduces more variables? So anyway, I'm going to sign off. Thanks for watching, anybody that popped in. And travel well. Goodbye.